Marjorie Taylor Greene has never been shy about asking questions. For years, those questions were conspiratorial, often dangerous, frequently directed at the wrong people. Now, those questions are aimed directly at Donald Trump. And the latest one, about the Butler assassination attempt, might be the most consequential thing she has ever posted. But before we get there, we have to start with what set all of this in motion: a death threat on her child and the phone call that followed.
The only time I reached out to him was via text message after I had resigned and he had been attacking me, and I was receiving it in just, I can't even count how many death threats. And but the death threats escalated on one of my children, and I had sent those death threats to the FBI director, Kash Patel. I sent them to the vice president, J.D. Vance, Susie Wiles, James Blair, and I even texted the president. And I was so upset over death threats on my children because of him. And the quotes and the death threat were from what the president had been calling me, a traitor. And I'm not a traitor to my country. Standing up for rape victims doesn't make me a traitor. And I reached out to the president and to let him know this is what's happening because what you're saying about me. And he was very unkind about these death threats. And so that was our last exchange, was on
What
text
did he say
message.
to you?
He basically blamed me. He had no compassion for death threats on my children. He blamed me basically that if my son were to get killed, it would be my fault.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. And I said back to him, I said, no one's children should ever be the victim of death threats or have any kind of political violence brought on them because of our politics, because of our disagreements. He had no compassion whatsoever.
What do you feel about that? I mean, you knew Donald Trump very well. You were very close to him. You were very friendly, supportive, and so on. To reach that point in your relationship, how do you feel about that?
I thought that tells me exactly who, it's like a nail in the coffin. It tells me exactly who Donald Trump is. Some of my biggest political enemies would never say that to me. Democrats that I may have had disagreements with in Congress would have never said that to me. No one's ever said those type of words to me. I don't know what kind of person basically has no compassion or care to someone's child being threatened to be killed. It's unimaginable, really.
That conversation tells you everything you need to know about where Marjorie Taylor Greene is right now and why she is doing what she is doing. A nail in the coffin, she called it. She sent death threats against her child to the FBI director, to the vice president, to senior White House staff. She even texted the president directly. And his response, according to her, on camera, on the record, was to blame her, to say that if her son were killed, it would be her fault. No compassion, no acknowledgement, blame. And she said something that landed. Some of my biggest political enemies would never say that to me. Democrats I have disagreed with in Congress would have never said those words to me. That is the moment. That is what cracked it open. Now, it is difficult to extend full empathy to Marjorie Taylor Greene here, because when Donald Trump threatened Democrats for advising service members not to follow illegal orders, she was silent. She is not a consistent voice against political violence. She has been selective about when it matters to her, and that selectivity matters. But the question she is now asking publicly about the Butler assassination attempt is not a small one. Out of the blue, Greene posted this, quote, "I'm not calling the Butler assassination a hoax, but there are a lot of questions that deserve public answers. Why won't Trump release the information about Matthew Crooks? Did he actually act alone? If not, who is behind him? Why the cover-up? She then directed her followers to read a lengthy post by a former GOP National Convention delegate from Texas. The post raised specific concerns. Trump's vow at the Republican convention just days after the shooting that he would tell the story once and never speak about it again. His lack of aggressive response toward the Secret Service agents who failed to protect him, 6 of whom were suspended after a DHS review. The timing, the sequence of events. Greene wrote, Donald Trump, of all people, should be leading the charge to determine all the facts of what happened that day in Butler, Pennsylvania. Why isn't he? Now, let's be clear. A federal task force concluded the shooting was exactly as it appeared. There is no confirmed evidence of staging. The conspiracy theorists who have pushed this narrative have offered nothing credible. But here is what is actually interesting about this moment. It is not really about the shooting. It is about what Greene is trying to do to MAGA. Think about the architecture of the Trump movement. At its foundation is a single belief. Donald Trump is a divinely chosen figure, a savior sent to rescue America. That is the root. That is what holds everything together. All the different factions, the religious conservatives, the tech libertarians, the economic nationalists, they attach their own specific hopes to Trump, but they are all anchored to that central idea. He is the one. Only he can fix it. Do not question him. Now think about what happens if the moment that crystallized that belief, the photograph, the raised fist, the ear bleeding, the crowd screaming, if that moment becomes uncertain, if the people who built their political identity around that image start to question whether it was real. It does not matter whether the questioning is justified. It matters that the questioning starts, because once the root is disturbed, everything above it becomes unstable. That is what Greene is doing. She is not just asking about a shooting. She is pulling at the root. She is introducing doubt into the one moment that MAGA returns to again and again as proof that their belief is justified. And she is doing it because she is at war with Donald Trump, and she understands the movement well enough to know exactly where to strike, where the conspiracy theorists have turned on each other. And the most effective weapon they have found is the foundational conspiracy itself. There is a non-conspiracy version of this same strategy, something that sounds like a conspiracy but is completely documented and completely true, and that is the corruption happening inside this administration right now in plain sight. Jared Kushner is on a $2 billion Saudi payroll while simultaneously conducting American diplomacy in the Middle East, while simultaneously asking princes and sheikhs across the Arab world for billions more. A company owned in part by Eric and Don Jr. was pitching drone interceptors during the Iran war. Pete Hegseth's broker was reportedly looking to buy defense funds before the Iran attack was announced. Never before have we seen so little effort to hide so much corruption. This is not a conspiracy. This is documented. This is what corruption looks like when the people committing it are not afraid of consequences. And that framing, not a conspiracy, but it sounds like one, because the reality is that staggering is exactly how the opposition should be talking about this administration, not just as a political opponent, as a criminal enterprise operating in public with confidence that nobody will stop them. Senator John Ossoff has been saying this. More people need to be saying it.
You guys know about Jared Kushner. Ivanka's husband. He's on the Saudi payroll for $2 billion. Did you know that? And now he's leading American diplomacy in the Middle East, apparently while at the very same time asking princes and sheikhs across the Arab world to give him billions more. If you're watching this online, don't take my word for it. Look it up for yourself. Can you imagine like a normal sitting U.S. ambassador just hitting up Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for billions of dollars? But he's a Trump, a royal, a princeling. The rules are for us, not for them. And it's not just Jared getting in on the action. A company owned in part by Eric and Don Jr. has been pitching Gulf kingdoms on its drone interceptors during this war. The Financial Times reported, quote, Pete Hegseth's broker looked to buy defense fund before Iran attack. I tell you what, never before have we seen so little effort to hide so much corruption.
Because MAGA is fracturing, not from the outside, from within. From people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who believed in the project and now feel betrayed, who built their identity around a man who just told them that if their child gets killed, it would be their own fault. That fracture is real, and it is spreading. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this story is moving fast, and it is nowhere near finished. And there is one more layer worth naming. The people who are now questioning the Butler shooting, and this includes Greene, are not doing so because they have new evidence. They are doing so because they feel abandoned, because the movement they gave everything to has turned on them, because the man they elevated has shown them in private exchanges that have now become public exactly who he is. Greene said it herself. It tells me exactly who Donald Trump is, a nail in the coffin. That phrase matters because it means there was a coffin. There was already doubt. There was already a gap between the public performance and the private reality. And the death threat conversation, his response, his blaming, his complete absence of compassion for a child being threatened, that was not the beginning of the doubt. It was the confirmation of it. This is what the collapse of a cult figure looks like in real time, not a dramatic public break, not a single moment of exposure, a slow accumulation of private moments that eventually become too heavy to carry, the phone call that was too cruel to ignore, the silence when she needed support, the blame placed on a mother for threats against her child. And now the questions, publicly, loudly, directed at the one image that holds the whole mythology together. Greene may not be a reliable narrator. She may not be acting in good faith. Her motives are tangled and her record is complicated. But the fracture she is widening is real, and the people watching it from inside the movement are going to have to make a choice about which version of the story they believe. That choice played out across millions of people who built their identity around a man who is now telling them their children deserve what happens to them, is the most significant political development happening right now. It is not happening on cable news. It is happening in posts and comments and private conversations among people who are quietly beginning to ask the questions they were told never to ask.